From Unearthed Films, Unearthed Classics, comes the early 80s Taiwanese slithery horror of Calamity of Snakes. I love the title. This is one I was looking forward to. Now, if you've seen many Hong Kong or Asian films of the 70s, early 80s, into the 90s, snakes were often used to a really gruesome and skeevy degree. Now, as the extras in this point out, that might be culturally insensitive to look down upon that. And I don't look down upon it. It's just the kind of thing you don't see in Western films, the way snakes are used. Snakes are part of the culture in that part of the world, part of medicine and food in that part of the world. But the way they're used in this movie is something you're not used to seeing. So, as I say, from 1982, Calamity of Snakes. What this film is this is a test of your mettle. This is a horror or cult or extreme movie fan badge of honor, perhaps, to be able to make it through the uncut version of Calamity of Snakes. This is, I guess to say it's not a movie to watch if you like snakes. If you like snakes, there's a lot of them in this movie. There's probably more snakes in this movie than you've ever seen in your life, all packed into this movie. But there's a lot of snake killing in this movie. There's a lot of real snake killing in this movie. There's a lot of snakes being chopped up while they're alive. I'm not going to get into the details. It's very gruesome to our Western eyes and an animal lover's eyes, or certainly a reptile lover's eyes. Now, they do provide this film in a cruelty-free version, which actually runs like 10 minutes shorter, because certain scenes I'm watching this knowing that there is the cruelty-free version that they've made for this disc release, and I'm like, what's left? And the answer is there are certain scenes that are the majority of the scene isn't there. So the story goes a little something like this. There is a greedy developer who's going to build a big old high-rise luxury condominium somewhere in Taiwan, and they're digging like a foundation, and it's a nest of snakes. It's filled with snakes. What do? We'll call the fire brigade, and they'll come and they'll take care of them. Now, I wasn't 100% sure what take care of them meant in this. Do they hose them down? Do they pick them up and relocate them? It seemed to indicate that whatever the fire brigade was going to do was a lot more humane than what happens in the movie. So basically, the developer's like, we're behind schedule. We can't lose any time. We'll kill them all. Then people are like, I don't know if we should do that. And his wife shows up. And she's like, I had a dream that you were killing snakes, and it's gonna come back to haunt you, and don't kill the snakes. And he's like, hey, my way or the highway, get out of here, lady. And he basically jumps into a bucket loader, front loader, scooper thing, and just eradicates all the snakes while his men chop them up and stuff. And it's a rather extended sequence of this. Now, I looked at that scene in the uncut version, and basically you just cut to the shots of the faces of the guys doing the stuff, and you don't see any of the grossness. It's still a gross movie without the snake killing, because it's just snakes all over people, which it's kind of gross. So, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. The work proceeds. The condo opens. They sell all the units. They're making that money, and what do you know? All the snakes show up to enact a slithery vengeance. It's like there's an earthquake, and they explode like snake confetti out of a snake confetti cannon up out of the floor in this high rise, and they just have at the people, and it's a lot of snakes. It's a lot of snakes. And the movie is ridiculous. It's gratuitous. It's offensive to modern sensibilities in multiple ways, and it's incredibly effective. There's some really goofy comedy in here. There is there's a sequence, maybe the highlight of the film, where there's this giant python, boa constrictor python that's holed up like in a warehouse or a work shed or something like that. Big place. They hired this snake wizard or something, this guy who is introduced by he's doing a show in like a nightclub, and the top and sides of a box are opened up, and it's just a box that was literally filled with snakes, and the guy was up to his neck in snakes, and then he pulls a snake out of his mouth like he was sword swallowing a snake. He is dispatched to take care of this boa constrictor, which he fights with kung fu. The boa constrictor or python repeatedly launches itself at him like a rocket, pretty clearly on wires. It's unbelievable. This movie is unbelievable. Would I recommend Calamity of Snakes? If you like to get your kicks with weird, bizarre, mind-bending, gruesome, extreme movies, then I said yes, you absolutely should watch Calamity of Snakes. If you're put off by people just being covered in snakes and the undoubtedly thousands of snakes that were probably killed during the making of this film, you probably shouldn't watch Calamity of Snakes, but it was something. Am I glad I saw it? I think so. I can say I saw Calamity of Snakes. There's that. I like to say Calamity of Snakes. I'll keep talking about it. So this is a really good transfer on this. Nice transfer. I watched the theatrical version. You put it in, you can choose your version. Theatrical version runs 86 minutes. The cruelty-free is 77 minutes. There is, in the extras, an uncut version, which is also in the neighborhood of 86 minutes and looks much worse in quality. It looks like it came off an old videotape or an old multi-generational videotape. It didn't look that great, and I didn't really pay enough attention or scan through it. My guess is that it's just more snake action, so even if I kind of chaptered through it, I'm not sure I would tell the difference. But it's there for completeness sake. And in the extras, they talk about there are multiple versions of this movie. There was a Japanese version that had even more. The uncut version on here is English dubbed. So if you just do not want to hear, if you do not, actually, I'm sorry, the main free feature is too. I look at my notes: Cantonese mono, Mandarin mono, and English dub on the regular theatrical version. So you can listen to it in Chinese or English. The uncut version is the one that's just in English dub. That's the only choice you have. So, there's also Cobra versus Mongoose footage in this. So if you want to see a fight to the death between a Taiwanese mongoose and a cobra, there are multiple shots of that in a montage, just over and over and over again. So it's got that going for it. It's sort of like the Towering Inferno, but instead of flames, it's snakes. So if you really wanted to see an Irwin Allen movie where people were in a high-rise being consumed not by flames but by snakes, Calamity of Snakes is for you. So extras, what do we have? Oh, also, again, I'm glancing, not so subtly because I tell you, I'm glancing at my notes here. Much in the tradition of a lot of Hong Kong and Kung Fu movies, it rips off music from other films. At one point, it plays a little bit of Goblin music from Dawn of the Dead, and at one point, it plays a little of the Bill Conti score from For Your Eyes Only. So I love that stuff survives in these video releases, that like it doesn't get stripped out for home video. There's something else I watched recently that it had wholehearted lift of music, like music from Shaft or something, and I was like, wow, that made it onto a US home video release. That's great. The extras, we have a commentary by Nathan Hamilton and Brad Slayton. I shut it off a few minutes into it because one of the guys had never seen the film, so he was just reacting to it as he watched it, and he hates snakes, so it was him just repeatedly. I chaptered through, and it was just him repeatedly saying how much this film is hard to watch because he hates snakes. It just sounded like two guys reacting to the movie, and I want information. I want to either hear from the people who made it or somebody who really knows about it and can tell me maybe there was information in there, but I was like, these guys are just screwing around, so I skipped that, unfortunately. A really good extra, though, really good extra on this called From Shaw to Snakes, The Venom and Violence in Early Chinese Language Horror. It runs 76 minutes, so it's 10 minutes shy of the full length of this movie. You get multiple film historians or film fans, seemingly from, I think they're all British, or Canadian, and they're talking about the history of Chinese horror movies, the history of snakes in Chinese horror movies, and you get a lot of clips from other films. They talk with the star of Killer Snakes, was a pretty infamous, previously the most gruesome Chinese or Hong Kong snake horror film I had seen, and he talks a lot about the production of that movie and how that worked. And then you have people who worked on Calamity of Snakes talking about it. So it was very interesting, very well made. You have also some Chinese and Taiwanese filmmakers and film scholars talking about the cultural aspects of it, which were fascinating, saying, to Western eyes, this seems barbaric, but to the time and the culture, this wasn't unusual. Really, really good. I would almost say, even if you watch this movie, if you buy this, if you watch it, you don't like the movie, that extra is very much worth of your time. Another one called Reptilian Reflections. Lin Kuang Yung in conversation with Chu Yi Chang. I probably mangled those as I'm reading them from across the room. That is two people who participated in that extra I just talked about in a longer conversation, like a 15-minute conversation they had about the making of Calamity of Snakes. That's really interesting too. You get the uncut version, which is 87 minutes, so it's a minute longer than theatrical version that's on here. You get alternate credits, the Mandarin intro and outro credits, which are, again, pretty low quality. That's 4 minutes. And then you get a gallery that's a minute long, various posters and video covers and stills that are set to a piece of the score. So what does the actual package look like if you get this Unearthed Classics? I'm just so impressed that somebody put this out here. Like, there are a lot of other companies that are trafficking in, and doing a fantastic job in trafficking in Hong Kong and Chinese cult and martial arts and stuff. But for a company that, as far as I know, hasn't done that before, and to put out such a really good high-end package is really cool. So you get, if I can see it without glare, you get a slipcover, which is doing its job right there, which slips to, it's basically the same artwork that's on the front and the back of the slipcover. And you open it up, and you get a disc with said artwork on it. So it's a really nice package for a really arguably despicable movie. It's really wild. And it does have some familiar faces in this. I don't know the names, but there is a character who plays like a toady, a sleazy, lackey of the main real estate boss in this movie, who I've seen in a lot of Hong Kong movies. So ultimately, while it is incredibly hard to watch at times, I did find Calamity of Snakes kind of fun and interesting. It's the kind of movie you then, as I've said about other things, it's kind of like The Ring tape. You can't just keep this to yourself. You want to watch it, and then you want to make sure somebody else sees this, just so that you're just like, you're not going to believe this. You got to see Calamity of Snakes. So on Blu-ray now, from Unearthed Classics, Unearthed Films, is Calamity of Snakes.